This tree tells an incredible story. We're up here in the Golan Heights, and this place has forever changed how I see agriculture and the ecosystem restoration. You see, these figs are ripe and delicious, and they grew on this tree, which remarkably hasn't been irrigated, pruned, or fertilized for at least 57 years, since the people living here fled during the Six-Day War. You see, usually we think of fruit trees as either wild or domesticated, but this tree has blurred the line. Though it was once planted by human hands, it now thrives independently, surviving the hot Mediterranean summer, 7 months without a drop of rain. And this tree is not alone. In this video, not only we will understand its global significance, but we'll actually learn together exactly step by step how to recreate such a food forest from scratch, so that you can share this knowledge and maybe one day replicate it. Now, I believe that this food forest, and ones like it, represent the ancient future of agriculture on Earth, because it holds the key for combining sustainable agriculture and the healing of degraded lands. If we understand its principles, we could design systems that feed people and heal the earth at the same time. But this story starts way, way back. In ancient times, human communities were hunting and gathering their food from their immediate environment. No planning or storing of food for the future. Evidence suggests that around 10,000 years ago, people started the process of domesticating specific species of plants and animals to be a part of their food chain, the agricultural revolution. But people were still locked within the paradigm of their ecosystem, growing only what could naturally survive in their immediate environment. At 1698, Thomas Savery has patented his first steam-powered device. By 1850, steam-powered machines were becoming widely used in farms in Europe. What was once done by many now could be done by just a few, releasing many people's labor for other activities. The Industrial Revolution. And then came another revolution, which we often don't think about. The Chemical Genetical Revolution. 100 years after the introduction of steam engines into farms, people started to introduce synthetic, man-made substances that were never in nature before, editing the genes of plants to change their characteristics. These and other technologies allowed humans to transcend the limitations of their natural environment, to grow food where it couldn't have grown before. And today, with a global distribution chain, we enjoy an abundance and a variety of foods that an emperor could only dream about a few hundreds of years ago. But this abundance has blinded us from seeing its fragile nature, which hides behind the scenes, because these industrial farming systems are dependent on the continuous inputs of chemicals, irrigation, and machine power. Basically, if we run out of petrol tomorrow, there will be no food in the supermarkets. If you leave a greenhouse or a commercial field alone and close the irrigation for even a year, you will have practically no food at the end of the season. But food forests like these thrive even decades after they have been neglected. And being in a semi-arid environment, this food forest is the best example that I know of a sturdy, long-lasting agriculture. So I first discovered this place in 2018, and to make this video, we set forth to find it again, this time in one of the most politically tense locations on the planet right now, 30 kilometers from the border of Israel and Lebanon, and about 100 meters from the border with Syria. So we drove for a few hours, going around the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus is said to have walked on water, and then I couldn't remember exactly where it was. So we drove around between the minefields, looking for the place.
We're 200 meters from the fence, and that's Syria over there.
We're just looking for food trees. During the Six-Day War of 1967, the villagers in the area fled east into Syria. While being an unfortunate set of happenings, it also happened to reveal the incredible resilience of this food production system. After some more time searching, we finally found it. Entering it feels like entering a desert oasis. "60 years of utter neglect, and still each summer the branches bend with the sheer weight of ripe fruits. While for most people, it's just an abandoned village, in my eyes, it represents a life where agriculture, village, and native forests merge into one holistic system.
So how did they do it? How did they plant these trees to be so durable and self-sufficient? Well, first and foremost, they used native trees. It simply wouldn't have worked if they used trees not native to the Mediterranean climate. But to understand more deeply how they actually planted them, I found someone who has been studying this for many years.
One thing that is not perfectly clear to many people, and this thing is that these orchards were produced. These figs were created, were planted by people. This is not for granted because many people go to these places and they see these abandoned orchards and they say, oh, there are many wild figs here. And I have to stop them and tell them, these are not really wild figs. These were man created. The fact that you are seeing an agriculture creation of human beings and you think it's wild means that it was made following natural patterns.
So Amit taught me there are 5 main principles in the establishment of a self-sufficient food forest. Let's go over them and plant a tree using this technique. This is a relatively well-known principle in the world of permaculture, and there are many good videos about it, so we'll not go too deeply into it. But basically it involves creating earth structures that will help catch the rainwater once it does come and sink it into the soil.
It's critical because it can really change the picture for a tree that has to go through, let's say, 8 months of drought here in a very hot and dry summer. It will create much better conditions. The second is deep soil preparation. This is a very interesting and very important principle. They already set the planting points months before that. And in those points, they make a preparation. And you dig in the volume of around 500 liters. You can do it a bit more or less, which is kind of creating an incubator or a womb in the soil that is meant to receive the later coming planting. You take out big stones, in exchange you put compost, well-composted compost, yeah. You don't want to put deep in the ground non-composted organic materials. You mix it with the local soil that you just dug out, everything comes in. So it's actually a hole that is dug and immediately is covered. Opening the compactability of the soil, like breaking it down. And this is very important because roots develop well when there is a sufficient amount of oxygen and air in the soil. And as the root gets to a more compact layer of the soil, the tendency of the tree is to stop the movement of the soil, of the root into the compact soil, because the root cannot breathe. Leave alone the mechanical challenge of getting in, there is no air, there is no oxygen. So what we are doing, we're actually kind of breaking through for them. The root will get into a deeper layer, which is much more moist. When I learned this initially from Palestinian farmers in the area of Bethlehem, I was asking them, I was amazed by it. Why are you digging these enormous holes and you're not even planting now? You're doing it 6 months before the planting, and it's so much effort. And they all told me the same, really the same word. I can translate it to English, saying, they told me, because the root runs. The root runs. How do trees reproduce in nature? It's an obvious question, and maybe the answer is also obvious, but for us as modern people, it's not somehow, because we are not innocent enough to implement it with its simplicity. Because I'm not trying to be sophisticated, it's as simple as it gets. What happens to the seed?
Hopefully it goes in the stomach of some bird or animal and comes to a new place and sprouts and becomes a tree.
Okay, so this is what I learned from all those people that needs to be done. A seed needs to be taken and put in the ground. You can look at it as just a very simple and obvious thing, but if you think of it maybe just for a moment in our modern times, it means that there is hardly no longer nurseries.
Because nurseries are completely based on not putting the seed in the ground.
Right. Nurseries are, you put the seed in the ground, but not in the ground that it's going to grow so much. So you are creating some kind of suspended tree. And it would be closing your eyes to say that it has no effect on the development of the tree later in the land, okay? I'm not completely against nurseries, and you can do short-term nurseries and maybe diminish the damage, but generally speaking, you should try to avoid nursery and do natural reproduction, okay? It's kind of a home birth to the tree.
Yeah, so what I understand is that when you put the seed directly into the ground, it basically develops, first of all, the taproot. It just goes way down and it's very strong. Yeah, so once you have it in a nursery, then you basically kind of kill this taproot that is trying to go as deep as possible, and then you only have the surface root, and then it's completely dependent on irrigation.
Right, the taproot is prevented from its natural development, and it's critical. Eventually, when you transplant to the ground, the taproot, if at all continues to develop, will not develop in the same power that it can when it happens in the natural way. So what we do after we prepared we did the deep soil preparation, we have this incubator ready. We want to bring in the agent.
Now there are two types of agents, seeds and vegetative cuttings. If we're using a vegetative cutting, like this pear branch, we will get the exact same genetics like the tree from which we took the branch from, and the exact same quality of fruit. But seeds are a genetic combination between two trees, so we don't know how the quality of fruit will turn out to be. Which is why for most trees you would want to graft them later on. But not for walnuts, you'll always get good ones, which is why I chose them for now.
I didn't know that the walnut is the seed.
Wow!
I call it, it's kind of like surgeons. You don't need to dig out the muddy, soil, big hole and put a big tree. You come like surgeon. You just open a bit of the mulch or whatever you put to protect this place, and you put in the seeds and you close it. And you need to be aware for wild animals that can damage this. You put few seeds, and like in nature, many seeds fall to the ground, just few of them eventually become trees, so we can imitate this as well. And it's not easy sometimes, because rooting, cutting of a fig or pomegranate or mulberry in the nursery is far more convenient to do. And when you try to do it straight in the ground, it's a different story. You're actually kind of creating this mini nursery in each spot, where you stick a few cuttings in the ground. You need to protect them from the sun banging on them. They are still rootless. They are just sticks in the ground, okay? And you need, of course, to irrigate them well and keep the right moisture, but not too much, because they could rotten, okay? But not too little, because they can get dry. And try it for yourself, it's an amazing game to do. A fourth is deep root irrigation. So it's nice to talk about it, because we're actually talking about non-irrigation, but it doesn't mean that we're not irrigating at all. So in this kind of climate, we do have to irrigate initially to establish the trees. The tree can have a great challenge to go through all that first summer just by itself, okay? And we want to establish a more a bit more of a farming and yielding tree, and not necessarily just a surviving tree like in the nature. And the way it looks like very generally is that we are using flood irrigations. The modern way of irrigating with drippers, if the water are dripping slowly to the soil, they're actually staying closer to the surface, okay? Because the water are kinetically drawn to the sides and they stay not so deep. And when we give a more flooding kind of irrigation, so more water are infiltrating deeper into the soil and actually eventually encouraging the root to go deeper to the ground. I would usually start to irrigate about 3-4 weeks after the last real rain. And then I would continue with this routine of maybe 2-3 weeks, every 2-3 weeks along the summer of irrigation. But every time I would give an amount of water that for regular people would seem too much. But the thing to understand here is that I'm not really trying to irrigate the tree, but I'm irrigating the soil. I'm creating conditions for the tree. And this is why I'm not trying to just feed the tree with water, but I'm trying to create an entire area around the tree, which is moisty, but not all the time, kind of coming and going like the rain. And as the summer progresses, we actually open bigger intervals between each irrigation, and we use more water in each irrigation. It's as if I am now skipping an irrigation. I wouldn't irrigate every 2 weeks, but every 4 weeks. But I took the amount of water that I didn't irrigate after 2 weeks and I would combine it together. So now it's a lot of water. So it can be 100 liters per tree once in a month, okay? Or even 150.
The next year, then you start from once a month.
Exactly.
And then you go once every 2 months, right?
Exactly.
Third year
could be, you might irrigate just twice, 3 times, 1 time, depends on the tree. Usually it takes between 1-2 years to 5 years at the maximum. I'm not just trying to push the tree forward with water and with fertilizer. On the contrary, I want to develop its ability to take the water and the minerals from the ground, and I can do it using irrigation, but I need to be in a completely different mindset. It's a way of approach that we are losing, the natural way of approach to a living creature. And it's the same for a child, which is a human being, just as it is for that fig tree. How can we help it get to really be rooted in the ground, to really be independent?
That's like the minimal intervention.
Yeah, you see how spoiled children behave. They usually don't seem so happy. Plants can be sustainable and should be sustainable, and also human beings should be sustainable. So, and in that case, we see how similar we are.
Last principle is weed suppression. But why would you want to suppress your weeds? Are you racist?
Well, so right now we're at the beginning of the rainy season, and you can see all these lovely newly sprouted weeds. They're annual plants, which means they will die when the rainy season ends. But before they die, they will flower to develop seeds that will survive the drought and sprout again in the next rainy season. Some of these weeds will grow to more than 2 meters in height while they're flowering in only a few weeks. So this rapid growth towards the end of the rainy season takes up a lot of moisture from the soil. So there is this basic understanding that until your orchard is really well established, you would want to come in towards the end of the rainy season and suppress the weeds somehow, at least around your trees. Now there are a few good ways to do that, and perhaps the best and easiest way would be to bring in some animals. They would eat the weeds and leave behind great manure. Other options are to use a string trimmer or a crimper roller device. So now that we know how they planted these orchards, the next big question becomes, so what? Well, incorporating fruit trees into agriculture is called agroforestry, and its benefits for farmers, consumers, and the environment are huge. Half of the entire planet's land, which is not desert or ice, is used for agriculture. So wouldn't it make sense to pay better attention to how we use this land? Trees drop their leaves, which cover the soil, creating a cool and moist environment, which is perfect for microorganisms, which are a crucial part of healthy soils. They take carbon from the air and put it into the soil, increasing its organic matter and feeding the mycorrhizal fungal network. They hold the soil with their roots, preventing soil erosion. Isn't it interesting that the Hebrew word for orchard is pardes, which is the root for the word paradise? In my mind, a forest of native fruit trees is indeed paradise. You have all your basic needs met, you can relax under the trees and eat straight from them, and you're in an environment that is much more lush, healthy, and integrated than any kind of modern commercial field. And the thing is, you can recreate these kinds of systems in a very productive kind of way. But it can even be more productive.
Agricultural systems without fruit trees, well, it's like soup without salt or a day without sun. Mixing them together is going to do something magical to your system. It's going to increase something called the land equivalency ratio.
Let's say we have half an acre of wheat and half an acre of apple trees planted separately, and each yields 500 kgs per year. If we combine them together into 1 acre of an agroforestry plot, instead of getting the expected 1000 kgs of combined yield, we might get 1300 kgs. So our land equivalency ratio would be 1.3. Did you ever think about the fact that a fruit is the only food that wants you to eat it? If you're eating a vegetable, you're taking a part of the plant's body. Same goes for roots, and seeds are just little plant embryos. But a fruit is a deal between a plant and an animal. The plant says, "Here, take this fruit, you'll disperse my seeds, and in return I will give you nourishment." So when we're eating fruits, we're actually taking part in the most harmonious energy exchange found in nature. It's a mutually beneficial energy exchange, given that we will take the seeds and put them in the ground.
Wow, that fig was the best one I ever ate.
Yeah, I told you everyone is the best here.